Hello, I'm Michael Wagner, and today we're talking with Léo Gaumont, the Director of Education Unlimited. And I wanted to start by asking Léo, many Christians think they should follow the Alberta programs of study and their home educating program. Do you think that that would be a good idea, or do you think that a family can give an appropriate Christian education by using the Alberta program of studies?
Curriculum isn't critical unless worldview is. And what's important is that you need to do something that's in keeping with the worldview that you have. So if you have a secular worldview, and you think that government is going to give you the answers that you're looking for, then go that route. But if you're looking for a biblical worldview, obviously what you want to do is find something in keeping with that worldview. So it does make a difference. In terms of, is it required, is it necessary? No. Learning is learning. And the curriculum is nothing but the tool that is being used in that process.
Some people think the Alberta program of studies can be Christianized, and so some Christian schools use it with that in mind. Do you believe the government curriculum can be Christianized sufficiently to give a Christian worldview?
I think that question actually begs another question, and that is what part of government does God have? Are they biblical? Do they acknowledge Jesus Christ? In all cases, it's no. So we can then safely say that government is approaching things from a godless, unbiblical, anti-Christian perspective. Therefore, their curriculum is going to then reflect that same perspective. So the curriculum should probably be godless, largely godless, unbiblical, and anti-Christian. To Christianize that would be something like offering fresh water from a pail of sewage. So I don't think it is possible to Christianize something that is based on a faulty premise to start with.
Do you think there's a particular curriculum that is best for all home educating families?
Yeah, the best one probably is no curriculum at all. And the reason is because every curriculum is based on a foundation of secular humanism. For instance, they all believe that it takes 12 years to educate a child. So curriculum was covered from grades 1 to 12. Where is it stated that it takes 12 years? I thought it took a lifetime. The best curriculum is just to use the bits and pieces, whatever is available, whatever resources are available. Sometimes curriculum is handy, and math as an example, it gives the parents the directives that they need. Oftentimes I think curriculum is more for the parents and for the children, because children are going to learn no matter what. The parents like to have curriculum because they like to be able to have some structure and to see that they've actually accomplished something. Even if the children didn't remember what they've accomplished, it's still, more for the parents and for the teachers, I guess, than it is for the students.
There's a lot of mothers who think they don't know enough to be able to teach their own kids. Like they would like to home educate their own children, but they think they don't know enough, they don't have the confidence. Do you think there are mothers who aren't able to educate their own children?
Like, home education is not for everyone. It takes a real commitment on behalf of the family, there's no doubt. There has to be some agreement with the father. If the father's not on board, it's not going to work very well. And there are lots of mothers who basically lose their wheels. They really want to. Similarly, there are dads who really want their children home educated, but the moms don't want to with that. They've got to work together on that. Children themselves, it's for the most part, they like it at home. There's no bullying taking place. They're free to be themselves. And of course, parents love their children unconditionally. Something that just not even the very, very best teacher on earth is going to be able to give the child in the school. So, to answer the question, should everybody home educate? Are there parents that really shouldn't be home educating? And unless the two parents agree, it's just not going to last very long. So there are parents that do send it back to school.
Let's say you were talking to a family, the husband and the wife, they both agreed that they wanted to home educate their children, but neither of them had gone very far in schooling, and so they didn't believe that they knew enough to be able to teach their own children. Would you still recommend that they would be, or would you still say that they could home educate their children? They'd be able to efficiently do that and give the children what they need in terms of academic achievement?
I think one of the big misconceptions about education is that people think that it's more about the teacher than about the learner. The teacher really should just be providing parents with the opportunity, or the student with the opportunity to learn. So even if the parents are not highly educated in an academic sort of way, they can still provide opportunity for the children to learn, and they can learn right along with them. So we've actually had parents who not only had a very low level of education, but they also had, they were speaking a language other than English. And the mom, in this particular case, not only did she learn to speak her English while teaching her children, but she also very much improved her academic level by going with it through it with their children.
How would that family know that their children are achieving? Like, how would they define success? How would they know that they actually did what they wanted to accomplish with their own children?
Well, your question actually asked a question, and that is, what do they want to accomplish? So if they actually have a goal, then they could measure by that goal. The problem is that your question is oftentimes a question that is asked of us by, are we doing enough? We usually ask, according to who? There's different measures. I mean, even in a school setting, you need to ask, are the children actually meeting standards? Which leads then to another question, which is, what are standards? So it's like trying to hit a moving target. So what we should remember is that in this world, there's about 7 billion people, and every one of them are different. Will the standard student please stand up? Who are we going to compare that student or your student to? They are unique, and all we can ask of them is that they learn and that they do everything to a level of excellence, but not perfection.
Let's say a family undertook that and they home educated their children as best they could, and they didn't use the government curriculum as you recommended. Would any of those children have any opportunity to enter a post-secondary institution?
Certainly. Post-secondary institutions will immediately tell you that they're looking for government programming, since 98% of the people who are going to those post-secondary institutions are coming from your standard school setting. But they have to do something with foreign students. They can't require provincial programming from foreign students, and they can't require them from students even out of province. So all we do is just simply suggest that they ask for alternative admission criteria, and that in the end, the post-secondary institutions' prerequisites are simply trying to ascertain certain levels of proficiency in certain subjects that they're going to be required in order to be successful in their program. There's no argument there. Students need to have that level of proficiency. If they need biology, then they need biology. If they need math, then they need math. And at a certain level, then at a certain level. There are different ways and means you can get that. You could write standardized tests, as an example, SATs, or their own entrance exams, an example oftentimes in English. And if they show themselves to be proficient, then they can. Another way is to actually go to colleges that don't have requirements. In other words, the open university concept, gain a few courses and transfer in. Another way is to just get accepted on condition, prove your abilities, and then carry on.
So is it, in your view, would a home educated student who ends up in a post-secondary institution, would they be considered more successful than a home educated student that took a different direction in life, say went into the trades or just took a regular laboring job or something like that? Like, should all home educated students aim to achieve a post-secondary education?
Well, one of the big misconceptions about home education is that we are doing this and we're going to try to outdo the school. But if the school is situated or is based on a faulty premise to start with, then all we're doing is just outdoing lunacy. They need to be who God has created, and they need to do it well. Now, the world has a vertical view of importance, with the PhD, doctors and so on, more important than your graduate students, who are more important than your undergraduate, and we keep on going until we get to the trades, and finally at the bottom of the pile is mother. But when you take a look at it from God's perspective, everybody is important. And all that happens is that God is just requiring us to do what we can with the gifts and the talents that He has given us. There's only really two careers in life, and that is the right one and the wrong one. The right one is a career that is based on the gifts and talents and abilities and interests of the student. The wrong one is not in keeping with them.
Actually, that ties in with something that many people believe, that you can be anything you want to be, and they tell the children, you can be anything you want to be. How does that apply in this situation?
I tried to be a mechanic this morning. It just didn't work. It's not there. Now, I have a brother who is a magician when it comes to mechanics. He can't do what I'm doing here now. What am I saying? Is that we're all unique. Every one of us have a unique combination of different attributes, abilities, gifts, and talents, and you're going to be happy if you're in that field or doing something that is in keeping with those things. Somebody who is not capable of doing math should not aspire to be an engineer, and someone who cannot hold a tune in a bucket should not aspire to being a musician. We can all play and pretend, but we will be unhappy. We're only going to be happy if we should be in keeping with the gifts and talents that we have.
Well, if a mother and father have decided to home educate their children, how long should they expect that basic education take? Like, how many years do they need to give their children that basic education? Do they need to give them 12 solid years of academic information?
Well, first of all, learning starts before we're born, and I don't believe it even ends when we die. We have an eternity to try to understand the wisdom of God. At what point do we start and finish? Children are learning to speak, as an example, very, very complicated things, making sounds, words, sentences, paragraphs, being able to communicate. At what point is that supposed to start? And when does it end? We're actually sending the wrong message to people. Is that it's not a beginning or an end, it's a lifestyle.
So sometimes in the past you've talked about the concept of unschooling. Is that what you're talking about here? Or how would you define unschooling, and do you recommend it for everybody? Or?
Essentially, if we agree with that original statement that I made about government and programming being ungodly, unbiblical, and anti-Christian, then unschooling can best be defined as taking a look at what's going on in the schools and not doing that. Unschooling is not unparenting, it's not unlearning, it's not unteaching, it's not undoing, it's not laying around on the couch. Matter of fact, all unschooling is just giving a far greater freedom to the children to pick and choose what it is that they want to learn, and the parents in finding the resources that are required to help them to learn that very thing. If they want to study nothing but berries or trees or stars for a while, then that's okay. If that's all they're interested in, that's fine. But really, where in life do we split life up into subjects? Where do we actually stop at 10 o'clock because we can no longer study what we're interested in right now because it's time to do the laundry? Life isn't like that. If you take a look at how school operates, it's probably one of the most dysfunctional institutions ever invented by man. And we normalize it. When people say, are we doing enough, or are we doing this, or what is unschooling? When we ask, what have you learned in your 12 years in school? Did you graduate? Yeah. What do you remember from your schooling? Usually we get laughter. So unschooling essentially is just simply not schooling. It's actually helping students to learn. And so it's more training and teaching in keeping with the biblical directives that we've been given, and honoring the uniqueness of the student, celebrating the diversity that God has created instead of wanting everyone to be the same, and which is mediocre at best.
So you were a teacher in school for 25 years, and most of that time in the public education system. What kind of things did you see within public education that turned you off to it, that made you adverse to it, and recommend that people go into a Christian home education situation instead of a public school?
I think in all fairness, it's not even a public school concern that I have. It's a general school concern, whether it's public or Catholic or private or alternative. The problem is that it's a giant industry that sees students as a form of currency. that was the thing that bothered me the most, was that the last thing on the agenda. I mean, the lip service was there. It was all about students and, we believe children achieve and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. But in the end, we actually, by the time those students I got them in grade 10, all they had on their minds was 3 more stinking years and we're out of here. And they did what they had to do to basically get out of jail. So, yeah, that was the thing that bothers me the most. I think is just the fact that it was a giant industry that worked for everyone. Matter of fact, the old saying, public education works. It certainly worked for everyone, except caring teachers and students.
In terms of Christian schools, would you put them in the same boat as public schools, or do you think they're better than public schools, or is there anything particularly wrong with Christian schools as to why people should choose home education instead of sending their kids to a Christian school?
That question the answer to that question would be dependent on the approach that the Christian school is using. If the Christian school is indeed owned and operated by the parents and not a church, and that the parents are in control and they are using Christian teachers and Christian curriculum, then I think that would be a better environment. The difficulty today is that the vast majority of private Christian schools have compromised to the point where they're, for all intent and purpose, little different from a local public or Catholic school. And so they become actually more dangerous for the simple reason that parents who are wanting a Christian education for their children, or at least wanting a good education for their children, are more likely to be vigilant sending their children to public school where we know, as we've stated before, the environment is godless and unbiblical and anti-Christian. But when you're sending them to an environment that is, at least in their rhetoric, saying that they are godly, biblical, and Christian, but in the end are doing everything that a public school is doing, it disarms the parents who are not then going to be as vigilant in helping their children to walk that Christian walk.
There was one instance where you had to deal with the truancy board because a particular student had come to you who the truancy board had concerns about. How did you deal with the truancy board when that situation arose?
Ask questions. There's lots of statements that are being made by all kinds of government authorities claiming to be in a position of authority. But since the authority is only based on the laws and the regulations that are extensions of those laws, then I think it is within our rights as citizens to ask upon what laws or upon what regulations are the demands that are being made. And if they can't supply you with that, then they're in the wrong. So I believe one of the most important questions that we need, actually the most important thing that we need to understand as citizens, not necessarily Christian citizens, as citizens of this country, is to start to question why we are made to do or asked to do, forced to do, directed to do the things that we are doing. If there's a good reason, then I'm saying good. If they're saying that we should go 100 kilometers an hour on the highway because any faster is dangerous or endangering lives, I think that's legitimate. But if somebody all of a sudden is telling you that you have to scratch your nose with your left hand instead of your right hand because that's how they feel, then that's an illegitimate demand. It's not based on rules, it's not based on regulations, it's not based on any law. So we beat that attendance board simply by asking them a very simple question. And that was when the attendance board had been given the authority to become the achievement board, at which time the whole case was dismissed.
Why was the case dismissed? What was the truancy board asking for?
They were asking for standardized testing to see whether or not the student was actually making, sufficient academic gains, which of course we need to ask, what does that mean? But I didn't even ask that. The only question that I asked was, when did that become their concern? Because the attendance board's concern is to make sure that the students are actually registered and in attendance to some kind of an education program in the province. That's it. Achievement is not their mandate.
This is going back to something we talked about a few minutes ago, but how would a home educating student plan for their career? Like as they're getting into the high school years, what should they be doing in terms of preparing for a career?
Yeah, that's got to be the toughest question of all. There's many a time that I've been asked to speak on that one, and I sound almost schizophrenic. I'm saying trust in God, and then on the other hand, I'm saying get off the couch. We have to, if faith is something that is in the here and now, we need to understand that there's a point in time when you're going to find your place. An interesting example of that was I spoke at Newfoundland, where I was asked to do a session on careers, and there was a whole row of students sitting there with their pen and their paper just waiting for this guru to give them some magic formula as to how they would find their place in this world. And I have to admit that in spite of the fact of having been standing in front of students for a lot of years, I was a bit unnerved by that. And I had that emergency one-word prayer, help, and immediately got a very interesting idea. So before we got started that time, I asked the parents if I could ask them a few questions. There were a couple of hundred people there, and I asked them, I says, may I ask you a question before we start? And they, oh yeah, sure, that's great. How many of you have some kind of post-secondary training? Something, let's say, beyond grade 12. You have a ticket, you have a diploma, a degree, something of that nature. Well, it shouldn't be surprising if I tell you that 80% of the people put up their hands. Then, all of a sudden, I got another question. So I asked them to leave their hands up, and then I asked how many were actually working in the field in which they were trained. And nearly all the hands came down. It was quite something to see. Then I got another idea. I asked them how many were happy at the work that they were doing, and almost all the hands went up. So what's the lesson to be learned here? Well, going back to one of your earlier questions, is they believed that they can do anything they wanted to do. They can be anything they wanted to be. And they went and became teachers because teachers get 2 months off in the summer, only to discover that they hated children. They wanted to be doctors because they knew that doctors made big money, only to basically want to euthanize most of their clients. Lawyers that hate law and accountants that can't count. I mean, we know about that. So what happens is that they found their jobs in keeping with their beliefs that they could be anything they wanted to be. But in the end, they all found their place that was in keeping with the gifts and the talents that they had. So the moral of the story is, if we really do trust that God created each and every individual, I think it's fair to say that He also created a place for them. I'm not suggesting some kind of a blueprint where if you miss a corner, you throw the whole universe into chaos. What I am saying is that there is a sphere in which you can find yourself where you will be happy. If you're very, very good with people, you could be a good teacher. You could also be an excellent salesman. But salesmen are not necessarily good teachers, and good teachers are not necessarily salesmen. So, really in the end, what career you're going to end up with, it's funny. You usually end up there. You actually can't really plan for it. If you trust that God created you in the first place, why would God create you and just throw you to chance? He's created you, He's given you all the attributes that you knew that you need to do what you need to do in life. Are you going to find it right away? Some people are lucky and they do, but not everyone. Generally speaking, those students that know what they were doing, or that they were going to be doing what they were doing when they were 15 or 16 years old, are almost all farmers or fishermen or tradesmen. And there is one constant with all three of these, and that is, it's not school. The farmers teach their son, the fishermen teach their son, and the tradesman learns from an older, experienced tradesman. So in other words, mentorship is what's going to find you your place much, much quicker than getting loaded with a bunch of academic subjects and hope that somehow or other one of them hits its mark. So you can't go out there and start guessing. But if you are actually going out there and going to work, you're going to find some jobs you don't like, you're going to find some careers you don't like, and one day you're going to find something that you really like. Don't go to university to find it. Go to university after you found it. Go to college after you've discovered what it is that you think that you should be doing. By then you're going to be an adult student, and that eliminates one of the issues about admissions. And the other one is that you're going to then rocket to the top, because you're going to be learning things that you definitely know something about, and it is something that you need in order to do what you know you want to spend the rest of your life at. And then finally, how do you prepare for it? Seek Him. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things, including your career, will be added onto you. For those people who are happy at the job that they were doing were happy at that job because it was where they should be.
So if a student has been traditionally home educated and they don't have official records, would you recommend that they try and get a GED or write departmental exams so that they can have a record of the achievement that they've been able to obtain in their studies?
Well, the GED, we like to call it a good enough diploma rather than a general equivalency diploma. And one of the big misconceptions about that is that it is a grade 12 equivalent. It is not a grade 12 equivalent. It is actually a test to ascertain whether or not the students are proficient enough to do high school level programming. This is not a test that says that high school level programming has been accomplished. And it comes with a stigma of dropout, which is something that you want to avoid. So no, they should not be doing GEDs. Departmental exams, the difficulty with them is that they are based on the program. So we call them content-specific tests. To give you an example is that if you've studied plumbing all year and then somebody gave you a test on electricity, you are going to demonstrate that you've learned nothing this year in spite of the fact that you are quite proficient in plumbing. So content-based exams, the departmental exams are basically the end product of a program that the government has put together, and essentially this is what you learn, and then we'll test you on what you've learned. So that's not good. If there is the odd time where a 130 level course, as an example, will be sufficient to get them going, and in a very, very rare instance, they need to have something in their employment records. They don't have a high school diploma. And so we've had students write the GEDs, but they're always a bit of an embarrassment for the people that ask them because they're almost always 100%.
You said write the GEDs, or did you mean write the departmentals?
No, the GEDs.
Oh,
and
okay.
On occasion, the departmental is actually used. If that's the only thing that's getting in the way, sometimes it's just easier just to do that. But we haven't had students write departmental exams for many years. Instead, we would recommend doing an SAT 2 as an example if they're looking for something in biology.
Right.
If you can't show that you've got something in biology, then an SAT 2 will show that. Also, we should point out that prerequisites are prerequisites are prerequisites. No one's going to argue those away. If they require English and math and biology, you need English and math and biology. They may mention English 30, biology 30, and math 30, but what we're doing is we're saying, no, we need to show English proficiency, math proficiency, and biology proficiency, which is, in the end, is what they're actually looking for, not necessarily the 30-level programs.
You referred a little bit to the parental authority in education. How much authority should parents feel they have over their children as opposed to the government? Like, doesn't the government have the responsibility of educating the children to some degree? Isn't there a trade-off?
That's a very good question because, in my study of the scripture, I didn't see that.
So you've actually been homeschooling since the late 1980s, so you're basically part of the pioneering generation of home education. And over that period of time in Alberta, generally there's been an increase in home educated students. Like every year there's a greater number of home educating students. So in that sense, the home educating movement has grown considerably since you started doing that. So do you see then the home education movement as being stronger today than when you were involved in it in the early or in the late 1980s?
There's a whole different demographics. Back in the late 1880s, I'm really old. Back in the late 1980s, the people that were home educating then really truly felt that we were doing something which was illegal. Many of the parents actually who were discussing home education at that time were prepared to go to jail for the right to exercise the authority, God-given authority we had over the children. Now, I admit in retrospect we were being a bit melodramatic, but that's the level of dedication that we have right now. And at that point in time, I think the vast majority of people were going into home education primarily because they felt called of God to do the job that He had asked them to do, which is to teach and train the children in keeping with the faith. Today, largely, the demographics has changed. The majority of people who are going into home education are not necessarily going into it because they are seeing that as their responsibility, as much as it is a demonstration of the profound disappointment with where the public education system has gone. So people are going into home education because the children are being bullied, or because they're being kept from advancing, or they're being pushed to advance when they shouldn't be, and so on. So the demographics has really, really changed in that respect. I would say that on a percentage basis, a significant percentage would be for people who are dedicated and really feel that this is their calling and their responsibility, their authority to do so. But not all. Where back then there were very few. How should they say, in the communist world there are a few hypocrites. And back then, when we all felt that we were in danger of being thrown into jail for making that decisions, the decision was seriously made. So today it's not that way. Also back then there was no funding, which incidentally is going to be the demise of home education. Today people are shopping for who's going to offer the most money. And in a kind of roundabout way, it goes back to the initial question that you asked about what I disliked about the public system, and I said it was equal with the private system. And it's now become even endemic problem within the home education community, and that is parents are out there essentially marketing their children, putting them out to the highest bidder, and the outfit that is going to give them the greatest amount of money is where they're going to go. That is showing a lack of judgment on in my opinion, and certainly a lack of commitment, because the commitment is to money and not to the educational health and welfare of the child.